Good evening and welcome to Flat Earth United Kingdom with me, Nathan Oakley, and joining me this evening is Cathexis. How you doing, Cathexis?
Doing quite well. Thanks for having me on, Nathan. Been wanting to come over here for quite a while. You doing okay?
With me, Nathan Oakley. Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure having you. I'm doing pretty damn fine. Can't complain. Got lots of
Nice.
trolls in the chat, as I'm sure you're aware. They're already taking bets on whether or not we talk about them. So I'm going to try avoid talking about any trolling that's happening to you at the moment, if that's good by you.
Well, I love it because we have the trolls and then the flat earth ladies. I don't know if you noticed. It's great.
Yeah, just at a quick glance, there we do. Excellent. So we've got a diverse chat. We may go to it at some point during the show. So my first question is going to be a typical one, but phrased slightly differently. So how did you find yourself in the arena of flat Earth?
Well, it's a bit of a it's not a long story, but I'll try to. It kind of is. I'll try to make it short though. So I got really unhealthy after a car accident many years back. Um, I had injured myself in a way I wasn't able to work out regularly. I was having problems essentially with diet because here in America, or really in the West, nobody has a good understanding of how weight loss works or how the body works, it seems. Everybody's trying to sell something. And so I kind of went down this path where I gained a bunch of weight and was in a pretty bad situation in my life. So I was up to about 280 pounds, very sick, had ulcers, had some other problems, and I decided to go back and see if what I learned about how the body works is true, because I was reevaluating how can I fix this issue? How can I go through and fix this? So I studied the mainstream paradigm, which for diet in the West, it's calories in, calories out. That's the paradigm. And it's eat less calories than you expend. Now, the problem with that is that's the definition of a starvation diet. You wouldn't put less fuel into your vehicle to go further. It's nonsensical. So I started looking at that and go, well, why are they saying this? And I looked into the history of it, and it appears that the USDA commissioned a scientific study done by a Dr. Ansel Keys back in the 70s. Now, Ansel Keys is confirmed that he frauded his results in order to achieve what the USDA wanted, which was the creation of the food pyramid, where they demonized fat and said that carbohydrates are pretty much the healthiest thing you can put in your body because it's just straight energy. So they ignored a lot of other factors of the body when doing this. And but also, come on, Illuminati pyramid, you know, Illuminati confirmed. You got the food pyramid right there. Anyways, that aside, I started looking into. I saw the fraud, and I said, "Wait a second. Science is supposed to fix itself. How come this hasn't been corrected? Look at how many people have Alzheimer's and dementia, and they're overweight, and they're sick." I said, "What the hell is going on here?" And I found an author named Gary Taubes, who is a science reporter. Uh, so he's been a science reporter for 25 years. He's extremely thorough, and he went back and did the research in this line of thinking of like why we get fat, and that's the title of this book, Why We Get Fat. And come to find out, calories in, calories out doesn't have anything to do with it. It's 100% hormonal. If you spike your insulin, you store fat. If you suppress your insulin, you lose weight. It's just that simple. So they demonized fat, and so that the medical industry can have a constant cycle of sick people. And it is a conspiracy if you really look at the root of it. So that tripped me up, and I realized, wait a second, we're dealing with something else here. The scientific institutions are not supposed to do this. What is going on? And when through my process, it was like 3 years after learning that I lost 120 pounds over the time, really in the first year. Everything got fixed, my health wise. I still have some injuries and whatnot that I deal with in my shoulder, but for the most part, I got my life back in order very easily and quickly through this new understanding of diet. And so when Flat Earth came around, just the topic that maybe science is wrong or being misled or whatever the case may be, it became extremely easy for me to put down my paradigm for a moment and research this paradigm and to see what is the truth of the matter. And that's how I got to where I am now. That's why on my channel I rail against scientism so much, because this is where the root problem is they've turned the lowercase s hard-nosed great science that has given us this technology into a belief system where people are prostrating themselves at the feet of these new high priests. Doesn't matter what field it is, either be cosmology, anthropology, biology, doesn't matter. It's being treated for the layman. It's treated, if the white coat has the information, then you listen to that. Doctors said, doctor approved, science approved. You hear this type of language all the time. That's a belief system. It's a new priesthood, in my opinion. So yeah, that's the long and short of it. That's how I kind of got where I'm at now.
So maybe I missed it in that. I mean, where did you go from diet to flat Earth or this arena? I didn't hear the
Well,
segment.
I was primed for it. That was the reason why I mentioned the whole diet debacle, and it just came up like it does for everybody. You see it in your sidebar. I think I was researching some conspiracy stuff, and it showed up in the sidebar. And of course, my cognitive dissonance kicked it out for the first month. But luckily, I was working with somebody at the job I was at who was pretty much at the same level I was, and I mentioned it to him. I laughed at it, joked about it, and he goes, you should actually look into this a little bit more. There might be something here. So I trusted him, went back. I spent like 2 days looking at debunking videos and was like, it's nonsense. I'm out of here. And I went back to the guy and he said, no, I really think you need to look a little bit further. And then that's what started me on the path of research. So it was, but like I said, I was primed because of the whole scientism issue, because I saw there was fraud in the institutions of science. People don't think that there is such a thing as agenda or dogma or or greed or influence that can affect the scientific method, or that can affect the institutions of science. And that's what I'm out here for mainly, is to wake people up to that. Like, these are institutions of men. They have rules that they play by, and there are agendas that they push, and we should just be aware of them. So yeah, a bit broad, but it's been now a year and a half, probably 2 years now. Actually, it'll be 2 years here in June. Then I stumbled across these topics.
Right, and you kind of went into free chan. That was your first step, was it not?
Essentially, actually, the first time I ever talked on Hangouts was with Chris Truthseeker and Jim Panda. I tuned into Chris's channel one night, and Jim Panda was doing what he does best, and I got so pissed off that the arguments weren't being countered a certain way or whatever, that I jumped in, and it was great. Unfortunately, Chris took that stuff down. But yeah, about 2 weeks later, me, Snack, Hitch, a vet, we created Free Chan, kind of as a way to, I don't know, talk about these ideas, argue about these ideas, but also give the trolls something to do. We let them stay there, we let them come there, and they were able to attack us freely, essentially. We didn't ban anybody. We had a very strong rule about it. And it kind of kept them busy for a couple months.
Well, you described it last time we spoke as a containment unit.
Pretty much. Pretty much. That was the private intention going into it, is because, one, it's going to sharpen my arguments. It's going to make me better on my feet if I go out there and talk to the most vehement, disagreeers. And it did, and it helped me out a lot. And I had a blast doing it. It was actually great. But once they figured out it was a containment unit, they ended up leaving. It was hilarious.
Right, but we still have another channel. I mean, I think it's is it David Quintana that runs the other channel? Oh, no, Andrea Sensi, my apologies, that runs Earth Debates, and they still populate that channel.
Actually, that Andrea Sensi's been gone from the scene for a very long time now. Actually, about 4 months, I'd say. He got threatened to dox, and a threatened of violence, what appeared to, and he took off. And then who runs Earth Debates is Kara and Cordis. These are they're trying to offer a balance in their mind, to all the flat Earth hangouts. So they put up this globe Earth one, which they'll usually get about 6 viewers constantly, and it's just their friends. It's kind of funny.
I mean, you mentioned about having your argument sharpened up significantly by debating with the trolls, and that was exactly what I found. Although it wasn't actually live, it was in the comments sections or below a video that I'd release. And initially, it was quite scary because you're kind of going out on a limb. When I did it, I'd done what I considered to be enough research, and I thought, well, I'm reasonably educated in the heliocentric system. I'm a bit of a NASA fanboy. I like this stuff. So, I've looked at it. Now I'm convinced it's all nonsense. And then you present that to somebody and a troll will come along and go, you haven't looked at this detail. Here's a detail that you've overlooked. And there's that sharp intake for me. I mean, I don't know about, I know you're a lot more gendered up than I probably ever will be. But for me, there was that sharp intake of breath moment when you go, oh my God, you're right. I haven't looked at that detail. Quick, let's have a very good look at it. And I quickly realized that they would bring you the information. It was, it's like, this is quite good. I don't have to do quite as much research as I thought. The trolls just come and present it to you. Wonderful.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I realized is they were this is what they don't get through their head. They are helping these ideas more than they're hurting. They think by putting out an opposition the way that they do is somehow going to stop this. Well, Pandora's box is open. It's in the public consciousness. These people just need to deal with it. But in the meantime, as they push forward and give it such, opposition and troll it as much as they do, well, they help the people making the arguments. I've changed numerous arguments of mine that I thought, like, for example, I thought the crepuscular rays was kind of a good argument for a close local sun. I'm like, wow, it's so beautiful and it's always the same. You can trace back those, the angles, and it looks like it's right above the clouds. And then I ended up running into Zysis, who is another infamous troll, and he was like, yeah, it does the same thing if you go underwater. And it makes it look like the light source is just above that point. And then I realized how much the atmosphere is really moisture and water. And I said, oh, okay. So we're dealing with an apparent sun and an actual sun. We're dealing with, basically the atmosphere we're in is a huge body of water, you could argue. So once they pointed this out to me, I just stopped using it and I started correcting others. Another one is the P900s of the stars, the P900 shots of the stars, where it looks like cymatic, really interesting, beautiful cymatic things. That's just the atmosphere, and it's out of focus. I hate to say it, but it's not real. You can do that with a telescope, you can do that with a camera, putting it out of focus, but the atmosphere is what's causing all those cymatic, expressions, you would say. So these things were pointed out to me. It's helped me, and I've therefore been able to go help other people. So they're helping Flat Earth if they want, if they want to admit it or not.
Do you use a telescope? Just as a slightly side subject, but are you a telescope user?
No, I'm not. I have looked in. My uncle had one growing up.
With the P900 footage, it's one where I saw that and I didn't pay any attention necessarily to maybe the comments that were going along underneath or the commentary. I just looked at the footage and kind of knew that that was the case and assumed that everybody else knew that that was the case. So I didn't realize that people were, I mean, what were they arguing with that shimmering effect? I know exactly what you're describing, having seen it through a telescope, but I've seen it on, when there's less atmospheric interference, if you want to call it that, which is exactly what it is. But yeah, when it's nice and stable, but seeing it not stable, what would that prove in the flat Earth corner? I don't really get what that's useful for. Why would you be arguing that point with Zysis is my point.
Oh, well, concerning the stars, they're not some beautiful cymatic little, entities up in the sky like some flat earthers have insisted based off of that footage. If you put them into focus and you take into account the atmosphere, they do look just like points of light. You can just get closer onto them. They don't behave in those those footages that you see in most flat Earth videos nowadays. That's just a problem with a digital zoom type camera like the P900.
Yeah,
You're
you're
not
spot
able
on
to,
in terms
yeah.
of it being, when you describe it with the water, as much as we're giving credit to Zeiss, just a regular guy who's got a good point. If you put an LED under water, that's exactly the effect you'll get. And
Yeah.
again, I foolishly assume that people will just take that as a given, but obviously not.
Yeah, because I've heard it, like P-Brain. I don't know if anybody's seen his channel on YouTube. The first video that he put out concerning time-lapse footage of the sun showing perspective lines in the sky, that video was absolutely brilliant, and that's the one that kind of sealed my fate, so to speak. When I finally understood what he was saying in that video, I'm like, holy, oh my God, like the sun might actually be moving instead of us. At 35 years old, I never asked that question to myself, and I found that to be strange too. But then he comes out with the second video saying that crepuscular rays prove, a close local sun, which it doesn't. It looks good, it makes sense, but when you dig into it, we're dealing with such atmospheric refraction. This whole Earth is quite is quite a complicated beast to be able to measure and understand properly. There's
Yeah.
always something new.
Useful effect though. I mean, I love it when the moon's on the horizon and it looks massive, and knowing that we're looking through something that is essentially magnifying it gives you a better view of the moon. It looks pretty.
Well, Negator would argue that's not what it is. It's just a simple illusion called the moon illusion. It's really just relative size. The only reason the moon looks as big as it does on the horizon is because you have another visual reference point, something like a tree or a house or the horizon itself. If you measure the angular diameter of that object, it does not change over the course of the night. So, but if you look at the Wikipedia page for this situation, and see, this is where it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. You see it. It is visually larger. It absolutely looks like it's being magnified. But then you go to Wikipedia and they explain that that was the old idea up until the early 1900s, that the atmosphere was magnifying things. And then what happened was they started moving towards this relative size explanation. So Negator, it's so funny. A year ago, before Rob Skiba came out with his theory on the magnification of the atmosphere, I was trying to make that argument, and Negator, strangely, was shooting it down harder than any other argument I've ever made. He was just completely, you're an idiot for thinking there's magnification of the atmosphere. Don't even say that again. Here's the proof, da 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 da. So I don't know. You get the most flack when you're right over the target. I tend to think there's magnification going on with the atmosphere. There's so much water in it.
Well, I absolutely think there is. I mean, from looking at it a lot, that's all I've got to go on, what it looks like. Yeah. I mean, I remember having this conversation 6 months ago with David Weiss, deep inside the rabbit hole. And he said the same thing. He said, it doesn't change. And he said, simply hold out your hand at arm's length, pick a fingernail that it looks roughly, the same size as, and cover it up so that you can get, a gauge of how big it is, and then do the same when it's above you. So I thought, okay, well, fair enough. I might just be being tricked. So I just did it a few nights, and some nights it's not being magnified. That's the reality of it. I'm absolutely certain that you could go out on some nights, get it on the horizon, and it wouldn't look any different than when it was, not directly overhead. But
most nights,
most nights,
happens a lot.
But some nights you go out and go, wow, it is ginormous. And, since David Weiss and I had that conversation, I just hold out my little pinky and go, yeah, it's definitely bigger. And while I'm standing there with my jaw on the floor, the chances are there's probably about, I don't know, depending on the time of day, there's people going by. I'm normally somewhere public. There's a spot up my road that just happens to give me a nice view from the top of a hill. And there's a shop there. And people will wander by me and look at me like I'm nuts, especially if it's the morning and I'm looking at Venus. When Venus is up and it's really light, the sun's out, and I'm like, in amazement, just with my head cricked right back. And people are walking past me thinking I'm a nutter, but I'm just observing it. It's just doing stuff, and I want to see what it's doing. How long can I keep it in my vision if it's Venus? How big is it if it's the moon? And it's stuff that it's easy to just go out and look at. Why do you have to take anybody's word for it? Why do you have to take some measurement or some video from ages ago when you could do it tonight?
Yeah. No, I agree. And I would almost say that we're programmed to not look up in a way. You know, the amount,
Lunatics. We'd be branded as lunatics.
literally, you know, my whole life I was interested in the sciences. Like you said, I was a NASA fanboy. I cared a lot about space. I cared a lot about understanding the distances. And but I was when I started going down this path to learn this stuff, I was appalled at what I didn't know. That's what really pissed me off because I'm like, wait a second, we're moving 66,600 miles per hour around the sun too, and then you see it moving, you know, we know the numbers. They just get ridiculous. 500,000 miles per hour going, the galaxy flying through from the Big Bang. You know, all this nonsense. And that's what pissed me off though, is that I didn't know this stuff, or I didn't ask myself these questions in an alternative way. Like, how do I know the sun's moving and not me, or vice versa? You know, there's that song by the Beatles, "The Fool on the Hill sees the sun going down, and in his eyes sees the world going round." And that's essentially how we've been programmed to not think about it. We think it is the most settled issue and situation, and NASA's got it under control. Therefore, the betterment of humanity, let's all just dump all our money into their laps. I mean, this is what we've been given, you know, growing up in these ages. So you get a lot of people waking up, questioning this stuff alternatively. You're going to trigger a bunch of people. It's like a religion, it's a space religion.
That's me fiddling around looking for things to screen share. My apologies. Yeah, it is. It is absolutely a religion, and trying to explain that to somebody when, especially if they're an atheist, if they actually class themselves as an atheist, to explain that they have a religious belief is nigh on impossible.
Yeah, it's the more I look into it, the more I see how much Rome had their hands on this. You know, there's a common theme amongst flat earthers, and I've even heard Mark Sargent say it, where, oh, well, science differentiated itself from religion, and you know that's why if they found out they were wrong, they wouldn't give it back to religion. Religion would then say, you know, we were right all along. But that's a false dichotomy, for one, and for two, religion is what manufactured heliocentricity. Go look at this was commissioned by Rome for Copernicus, who was a priest at the time, in order to make. He didn't even want to do it or release it because he knew the implications of it, but they still forced him to about 6 months before he died. And from there, you have Jesuit astronomers' hands on every single significant move forward with this heliocentric Copernican system. This is an extension of Rome. The planets that we give our attention to are the Roman pantheon. It's just that simple. It's the Roman pantheon. And you look at the occult nature of like Jack Parsons and what they were doing early on, sending phallic symbols up to the, you know, mother sky, and sending off its payload. I mean, this is, in my opinion, there is a level of occult magic that exists. You see it with Freemasons doing hand signs. You see this. I mean, the the astronauts doing hand signs. This shit goes really deep, and I think it has a lot to do with that Roman pantheon. I've been studying this a lot recently, and I think heliocentricity is mathematically prescribed sun worship. Pretty convinced at this point.
Are you suggesting that rockets are just big penises?
In one way, absolutely. That's the esoteric side of it. The exoteric side is, well, just a firecracker that looks like it's going going into the ocean.
So give it me in simplistic terms. This is for the audience, of course. Maybe people watching that have never heard any of this, and it's absolutely mind-blowing. There may be people who are died in the wood veterans and have looked into every aspect of this subject. But what's the ends? Why the deception, in your view?
Well, my argument this whole time has been, if you control a population's cosmology, you will be able to control their philosophical axioms, which will then result in whatever behavior that you've kind of selected for them. So we know the Big Bang cosmology was manufactured by Lemaitre. It was given credence to essentially over the 400 years that led up to the Big Bang being officially stated as what they think it is. And with the Big Bang cosmology, this gives way to the billions of years necessary for evolution to be likely. This gives way to cosmic evolution, to life evolution. It gives way to this infinite expanding universe where everybody is essentially insignificant on a speck of dust flying through. Like we've heard it, but this, in my opinion, is philosophical warfare. I think that Rome saw when the Reformation occurred, and that's another thing people don't know. The Reformation is when all of this happened. Rome has a policy, a tactic rather, the Jesuits have a tactic called learning against learning. And what the tactic is to input false information about reality to your enemies in order to control them. So I think Copernicus was part of that. I think that pushing people to this heliocentric idea, even Nietzsche had said it in his book, The Parable of the Madman, where he says God is dead. Well, people don't read further than that point. He says, I will tell you, we have killed him by pushing God to the edges of infinity, by removing the sun from our system. We're now flung up, down, left, right. Is there even an up anymore? So this is a deep, very long-standing plan in order to disconnect humanity from, in my opinion, their spiritual divinity, so to speak, in the oneness with the creator. And it doesn't have to go that route. I mean, the fact is they have control over your mind. If it's not true, if the Big Bang cosmology is not true and space is not what they're telling us it is, and Earth is different than what they're telling us, people should want to know that. That's enough of a control mechanism in itself. So that's the way I look at it. I think all roads lead to Rome. I think Rome never lost power, and they just anthropomorphized their prior pantheon into the sky. But that's what the pantheon was built off of. It was built off of the wandering stars. So it's still the same type of pagan worship that existed 2,000 years ago and more.
But do you not think it's a bit more materialistic though with the Big Bang cosmology? I mean, it's designed to make matter God, therefore
yes,
more materialistic in terms of the way you're going to be, more nihilistic in terms of the way you're going to view things.
absolutely. And that's what I mean by the axioms. And thank you for bringing that up, when you create this materialist answer, which the Big Bang cosmology is exactly that, then that's what removes the divinity. It's this philosophical materialism. And we have science, which is methodological naturalism, methodological materialism, you could argue, that has given us this ability to talk over these devices right now and interact with all these people online. That's great. I love lowercase s science, engineering, technology. But the problem I have with materialism is when we get into the realms of anthropology, of cosmology, of even astronomy, there is no way to conduct science in the traditional usage of the word. Science is a method. And then it's also the body of knowledge that comes from that method. You can't just stare at the stars and come up with a mathematical construct like the Big Bang and insist that it's science. These men are philosophers who have adopted a white coat and this scientism. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's materialism. This is why we see there's so many atheists and so many nihilists. I was a nihilist. I mean, literally, because I was an atheist for 8 years. And I fell into that trap. Every morning I'd wake up and say, what's the point? I really was to that point in my life. Probably why I gained most of that weight, because it was right around that time. So it's devastating. And think about it. It is the perfect philosophy for a slave population. There's no better. These people are masters.
Who are these people?
Rome. The Roman power structure. It never went away. It's just a different entity now. It's a government that governs governments behind the scenes through methods of control that are beyond, and timeframes that are beyond our comprehension. The more I look into Rome's influence and effect from the Reformation up, and then prior to, of course, Reformation, the Jesuits are a brutal organization. They will do the ends justify the means in all regards. And this isn't conspiracy theory. This is history. And the more you look into it, the more you can see that Rome's hands are completely all over the situation. But nobody's talking about it like this. I will give a shout out to a good friend of mine, Infinite Plane Society. I've been listening to him a lot. I disagree with some of his, ideas and whatnot, as we all disagree with various things, but he's been nailing this to some degree. He does come from a Gnostic perspective, so that does offend some, good Christian folks, and I don't blame them. But he is calling out this Roman structure properly. Like, he actually has been accurate with his history that he's been pointing out. So this has just been my research lately. I think that the ball in heliocentric model comes from Rome.
Okay. I mean, knowing that it's been debunked, I mean, I can confidently say that you don't think we live on a ball and probably never will again. Am I right? Before we move on, just please say yes.
You can't unsee what you see. That's my problem right now. I don't know what it is, but I'm pretty sure that it's not what they're telling us. That's the best. I think that the Earth is a realm. We've got the astral realm and we have the earthly realm. I think Tesla was right. I don't think we're flying through space. I think it's all nonsense.
I mean,
but I don't know the shape.
The after effect was where I was going with that, though. So if you ignore the initial shock, so if you ignore the sharp intake of breath moment when the penny drops for you, I mean, I'm sure it's a journey of discovery, like with most people, but there's going to be a point where you go, it's not what we've been told. I mean, you linked it back to discovering that they've been fraudulent in terms of our way of processing food, and then looking into those deceptions and being led through the rabbit hole of the deception of our Earth. But what happens now? You've had a massive turnaround in terms of your physical appearance, if you want to put it in that, or your health. What's Flat Earth done?
It has been a new renaissance of my mind. I can assert that with confidence, and this is why I attack people who try to dissuade others from looking into the topic. I've read more books in the past 2 years than I had in the prior 10. I've done more independent research, wrote more papers. I've got 3 books I'm working on. This is something that has, and you see this with everyone. As soon as somebody starts getting, into this direction, it does create almost this revolution of the mind. It's a new renaissance. And you also find that most of these people who are out here talking, 8 out of 10 of them are artists in some way, shape, or form. They're creative, because this requires the right brain in order to understand it. One needs intuition and discernment in order to see through deception, and they've manufactured this left brain society with their fluoride and and diet in order to make it so that nobody can discern what's going on around them. So it is an awakening in one way. As to what I don't want to say like, oh, the flat Earth awakening, but it is an awakening of the mind when somebody finally steps through that door and asks that question. And you can't unsee it once you've seen it. That's the problem with these guys, the trolls. Their little paradigm has been shattered, and they can't put it back together again. And it's cute. I feel bad for them.
Yeah, it's nice to see, but as you say, I see them as totally necessary. I mean, without them, we would have just a circle jerk. There's no other way to put it. Everyone patting each other on the back and ignoring very key details. As much as I can debate and try and ignore the heavens in relation to the land we walk upon, they're still there, and I don't know what they are. And that's, to me, very, very exciting. The world of possibility that's before us makes me excited, but for them, it's a travesty. It's the most terrible thing in the world, and I don't know. I quite like that. If it wasn't set up in that way, we wouldn't be driven forward by their antagonistic behavior. And you need antagonists to progress things, and they are here. They are around the campfire. I keep saying the same things. I just see them as flat earthers. If people were to come to flat Earth without the slightest idea what was going on here, they would see those people as much as the people who are the full-on proponents of it, like myself, who will shout from the rooftops that the Earth is flat. You may not be one of those people who would shout it from the rooftops, but you're no different also. You are still in the quote-unquote arena of flat Earth, same as them. So when people come to this arena, they're the people they see. So I just view them as flat earthers. They may not view the Earth as being flat, but that's something completely different anyway.
No, I agree with you. And, my whole thing is I've been promoting alternative cosmology. I think that I think John LeBon is right in the notion of branding. The word flat Earth has been programmed into us in such a dramatic way that it's kind of foolish that we run with it to some degree. I mean, there is the element of taking it back, and there's this element of being punk rock about it, But at the same time, it would better be defined, I think, is if we talked about it in alternative cosmology. Because I do look at electromagnetic universe theory. I've even looked at Hollow Earth. Hell, I got Lord Stephen Christ's book. Well, it's not his book. It's the book he plagiarized by Cyrus Teed. I got this right on my desk. So, I like researching, the alternative ideas, especially the geocentric system. And, people shouldn't be afraid of it. And there's so many people who wish to dissuade, and there's so many people who put personality over topic, or personality over or the merits of the information being put forth. It's a really frustrating arena to be in. But I mean, everyone probably thinks I'm a flat earther anyway. Those guys at Earth Discussions, I know that they insist that I am. But I've never publicly said that. So, but yeah, it can be a frustrating topic.
Well, I mean, it is. I mean, maybe I should ask heliocentric questions to keep them happy then. I mean, we've got masses of universe on the screen at the moment. Is Tycho Brahe something you've ever looked at? Someone?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Fill me in like I'm totally ignorant of the subject. I'm just trying to give stuff to the audience that they may not have heard before.
Well, Tycho Brahe, in my opinion, was murdered by Kepler, but that's a little conspiracy theory surrounding him.
Great place to start. I mean, no. Definitely start there. I think that's the best place to start. I'm glad you started there.
Yeah, Kepler was working for Brahe, and Brahe was pretty well instituted for a while before Kepler came around. Now, he had his own slightly different geocentric system, and he was in slight opposition of heliocentricity. It wasn't like this raging philosophical war, but it was still, there were different models. There's the Ptolemaic geocentric system, there's the Brahe geocentric system. There's all these different ways to explain what we see in the sky. Well, the observations that he had collected over the years, he wouldn't give access to Kepler. Kepler kept trying and kept trying and kept trying, and to no avail, because he wanted to use it to kind of bolster Copernicus's ideas. And I think Brahe knew that. All of a sudden, Brahe goes, and it's so funny. They claim that he died from holding. He didn't go. He was holding his pee too long when he was at the dinner with a king. He didn't want to be rude and get up, and that caused some kind of bladder problem and infection, and he died 3 weeks later. But with the exhumed body, they found traces of mercury on his mouth, essentially, of his corpse. So, I mean, these guys were prolific, the alchemists back then, they were prolific with these chemicals, mercury and such. So I think it's quite likely, because as soon as Tycho Brahe died, Kepler got all his observations, and he went forth and created his career. Now we know him as such as champion of heliocentricity today. So I think they did this on purpose. Any good rational system that might have opposed them, they choose their models on philosophical criteria. I know Jaron uses this quote a lot. It's by George Ellis, a modern cosmologist, where he says, I can construct you a geocentric or heliocentric coordinate system, and you would not be able to disprove either of them on observation. I want, and I think he finished off, he says, I really wish more people knew that we're choosing our models on philosophical criteria. And that's it. And you even see Hubble said the same thing. Hubble said that they're choosing their models on philosophy. So that's my biggest problem. You know, whatever the case is at the end of the day, I don't think it's this magical space religion of heliocentricity, which is mathematical sun worship, in my opinion.
Sure. Do you assess the situation going back 500 years, 2,000 years, 150 years? Where do you think the? I think you've already answered this in part of it, but I'm trying to spread it out in terms of giving it an actual
Sure.
time frame.
Heliocentricity really didn't originate until Copernicus. There's really not much I've ever been able to find on it before then. So you can see it's directly in the Reformation was happening between I believe it was like 1470 up till about 1540, or 1540 is when it got really hot. I think that's when Luther put down his 90 thesis. And 3 years later, the Jesuits were created, literally, and Copernicus's model was put forth by the church. And it happened in such a short sequence of time that it's absolutely a response to the Reformation. It's like they had this plan on the books, like they knew exactly what to do and how to do it as soon as the public got a hold of the Latin Vulgate. That removed their power, so they had to create a new priesthood. So I think that control mechanism goes back 500 years, but the Roman control mechanism, we're going back 2000, 2500. You know, these pantheons that we call Jupiter and Saturn and all this, they're all the gods of the old. And before Rome, there was the Greek pantheon. Before Greek, there was the Sumerian, and there was the Babylonian pantheon. It's all the same. It's all the same. Every god that we have on this earth has a relationship to a planet. And that's the origins of it. And these control mechanisms have used that against humanity. It's like the Wizard of Oz. You know, it's the man behind the curtain type situation. But yeah, the deception's deep. It really is.
But boil that down for me, though. You say they've used the. Shall I call them planets? Shall I just call them planets? They've used the planets against people. That's how I would boil down that statement. And that's like, for anybody who's listening, I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of somebody listening going, that makes no sense to me. How can they possibly?
No, I know where you're coming from. It's hard for me to articulate exactly because this has been kind of a recent research for me, but let me give a good example. And I don't mean to upset anybody. I've talked to a lot of very good Bible scholars recently about this, and I haven't been able to find a good resolution to this problem. So Jehovah, which is the God of the Old Testament, the God of the Semitic tribes that came out of Sumeria and Babylon, essentially, they decided, what it appears to me is they decided on one God. And if you recall in the Bible, it says, have no other gods before the. Well, that one God is Jupiter. That's it. Every single one of if you can look at a list of names for Jupiter that all the other pantheons had, and that what it was referred to all the way up until even now, and there's numerous names. Even Baal is associated with Jupiter. Even Jehovah, unfortunately, is associated with Jupiter. The modern idea of gods comes from this notion of these these wandering stars. These are the great powerful beings in the sky, essentially, that affect our life in some way, which is the root of astrology. So I think they've used that against humanity through holy books, through ideas, through religious institutions. And I'm not saying that there isn't a creator in any way, shape, or form, like at all. I'm saying that the Gnostics, the early Gnostics, which is considered heresy by modern Christians, they claim, no, those planets are the demiurge. They're the lowercase g gods that humanity is stupidly giving their attention to, and there is a prime godhead above them that is being ignored. So, this, like I said, this goes really deep, but you got to trace Rome back You got to look at the power structure, even back to Babylon, and where these ideas came from. But heliocentricity is just an updated version of this. So, yeah.
So do you think we'll actually, in the future, reach a point where people appreciate that what's on screen now is nothing more than a complete load of nonsense? Or do we have the situation where people are genuinely and totally controlled by the television?
Well, here's the thing. Pandora's box is open. There's no going back. It's in the public consciousness now. First, what are the three stages of truth? You know, first they laugh, then they attack, then you win, or however it is. You know, the mainstream society now has only heard murmurs of flat Earth with B.O.B. and tequila. But you look at someone like Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving has hundreds of millions of fans internationally. Even LeBron James had the words flat Earth in his mouth. That is insane. It's absolutely, I mean, you got Nike pays $300 million to that man just to say Nike. This man came out and said, hey, do you think the Earth's flat? And Kyrie responded, yes. This has put it into the public consciousness in such a very specific way that at first they're going to laugh, they're going to ridicule, they're going to scoff, but the question is going to keep rattling around in their head. Wait a second, how do I know this? How do I know it's a globe? What if these people are right? And over time, I mean, there are 17 million videos of flat Earth on YouTube right now. So if it's like we did the work over the past 2 years, putting up information, experiments, you know, ideas, all of the things that we've been doing out here, the flat Earth community or alternative cosmology community. Now it's primed for the public to go and figure it out. So it's not going to be en masse, but like I said, Pandora's box is open. Next 5 to 10 years, this is going to become, as much as the trolls don't want to hear it, this is actually going to become a relevant topic.
Do you not think it's reached a point now where you've been doing this a good couple of years now? Surely you see it that it's an acceptable subject to talk about at the very least. I mean, I know people have talked to me about this in public, you know, without any qualms. People who, for example, people who are on my Facebook that I actually know, maybe 100, 150 people of the, I don't know, 1,000+ people or whatever it is on Facebook now, have actually approached me in real life and said, oh, what about this flat Earth? But they've seen it for 2 years on my Facebook. But it seems like, to me, people are more comfortable about actually discussing this without feeling like they're going to be ridiculed, or, you know, that they're attacking a subject or broaching a subject that might get them considered to be stupid or whatever. It just seems to be a more acceptable subject to talk about now, far more so than 12 months, 18 months ago. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's what I mean. Like, you know, when it gets into the public consciousness, it becomes, once somebody hears it and they get past that first point of ridicule privately, so to speak, they'll end up just, it becomes something. Honestly, I see it turned into kind of a meme, you know, where it's like a joke at first, but that's fine too. You know, it's still just going to push past their programming. They're going to have to ask themselves these questions sooner or later. And so overall, I think it's a great thing, because now you have people interested in measuring their world around them, studying the world around them, trying to understand the world in the stars and the moon and the sun. It pisses me off so much when people try to like ridicule somebody into not looking at this or dissuade them, because that's all these people are doing. There's going out and testing the world around them. Fuck your, oh, sorry, Nathan, screw your absurd notions of authority structure of you know, the white coats. Let's go out and find this out for ourselves. So we see a lot of people who are coming on to this who are new over the past, especially the past 2 months. And I've been able to talk about it in public a lot easier. You know, if you make a joke here and there, a year and a half ago, I used to have people get really mad at me, but now it's kind of turned into a meme.
Well, you touched really early on probably my favorite thing to point out to somebody, and that's about the movements of the luminaries, the luminary bodies, the sun, the moon, the stars. Forget the stars for the moment, but just the sun. And
Hmm.
if you consider that you are stationary and it is moving above you, that is something
Hmm.
that most people haven't considered. You know, I'm just summing up exactly what you summed up, but that's a paradigm shift in and of itself, to
It's
stop
massive.
believing that the ball is rolling, you're attached to it, and that thing out there, forget beyond the solar system, you know, that thing there is stationary. To think that it's
It's
actually moving, and furthermore, that's exactly how it appears. That's what it looks like it does. You know, that's what it's doing if you just glance up into the sky.
Yeah, this is why I say all of this is just a return to the senses in a large way. Like, if you, and I've made my argument that I get trolled about the most from the beginning was, you know, because I do come from it from a philosophical perspective, is, and I'm sure you've heard me make the argument of primary knowledge. If you go back to what you can receive through your sense data alone, your primary knowledge, you know every human being on this planet has only experienced flat, motionless, and the sun, moon, and stars moving overhead. That's a fact. There's no way around that. Globers need to understand that. They need to accept it before they can move on. And when you finally ask that question, am I moving or is it the sun that's moving? It is a massive paradigm shift. I can't even describe it. I mean, it would sound kooky to you if I explained it in its full actuality of how it affected me. Like it was almost a spiritual experience.
Yeah, and further to that, the people who are actually intellectually honest will admit that all of the people who are dealing with our world in a sort of surveying manner, or even just as we've described, how we experience life, is flat. Therefore, people who have got explanations for why there isn't any flatness have to put caveats in. They have to justify the flatness first, or the converse of that. They've had to take out the variable of c because it's nominal. In other words, they have to explain away the fact that it's flat. You know, these things, the heliocentric nonsense, in terms of how we address life in general, has to address the fact that it's flat. And all of the people who are going out and exploring flat Earth are discovering things that essentially the heliocentric model, you know, the people who have come up with this over the period of 500 years, let's say, aren't stupid. They're not going to leave these cracks wide open. They're going to paste them in. And that's why we have these caveats in our common vernacular. You know, they've hijacked the language in order to brainwash people by their own way of being, by their own speech patterns. You know, you don't need shills to program people with ball nonsense. We do it ourselves, you know, just by talking. In the nature of our conversation just here now, there are certain things we have inadvertently said without realizing that we have planted dozens and dozens of seeds of ideas. And we haven't got control of this. It's the way the language is structured. We don't have any choice. We you know, we could speak a different language, but the same thing would apply. You know, we are trapped in this way of speaking that convinces people of stuff. You know, the what's the way they changed that recently? The geosynchronous and geostationary. You know, geostationary, that conjures up some very bad images. So let's call it geosynchronous. That's much better programming, much better use of language. You know, there's that sort of stuff rife everywhere. And you know, we just have to accept it. But it's knowing that we're doing it that kind of makes me smile. You know, every time you hear yourself do it, it makes me think, oh, there we go again, accidentally programming people, especially in this format when we're talking. You know, how have you found that? You know, at the moment you're semi incognito, but you know, you're out and about on YouTube talking about this subject. Have you found that you're more or less ridiculed for being behind a little bit of a wall in that respect?
I've actually found extremely positive. I'd say 95% positive for the people I interact with. And then of course you've got your trolls. But oh, to your point with language though, I find that to be really interesting because we all speak with it, kind of reinforcing our own paradigms all the time. Like I've had to kind of uproot a ton of things that I've had just over the years. You know, the way that we talk, the way that we communicate with one another. It's amazing to see how much programming there is everywhere. especially in things like TV and radio and whatnot. But but yeah, out here I've really had a pretty decent interaction with most people. People have responded very well. I try to, and the reason why I take the stance that I do, you know, partly is because I'm trying to like bridge the gap for people who, because if you find somebody who has never heard of flat Earth and you tell them that you're a flat earther, nothing you could tell him the lottery, the winning numbers for tonight, and he wouldn't listen to you. Like they immediately put you in a box where nothing you say is ever going to be taken. And I found that if, because I still don't know. I mean, I'm actually being honest about that 100%. I don't know the shape of the Earth. I haven't been able to see it my own self or be able to measure it in a significant way. So the way I look at it is these, it's such a frustrating topic because people end up making judgments about what your intentions are, what like I've been accused of, oh, you believe it's a ball, you're just lying to people that it's flat. And that I think is just absolutely hilarious. Why would I put myself out here in any significant way if I wasn't truly questioning this stuff? And I found a ton of anomalies and a ton of problems that are completely unexplainable on the globe Earth model. So, but I find it's better to reach out to people who, uh, you know, when you take this neutral position, because I don't know, hell, it could be concave in a weird way. You know, like if you look at World Beyond the Poles, it's a concave system he's explaining. But he's talking about a grander, not like the Lord Stephen Christ system. He's talking about this grander, larger system. And I mean, how can anybody know the orientation of the continents? How can anybody know any of this stuff?
Yeah.
So,
Well, like you say, we're never going to get high enough. Well, so far, I have never experienced in a world that's high enough to take in the entirety of it. And what do we have to then go on? Well, it's what's on screen now. That's it. That's what we have, and we just have to
yeah.
simply take their word for it. And no, I don't know. That's just doesn't seem good enough these days.
Yeah. And I'm perfectly comfortable saying I don't know. And that's what I find to be probably the most troubling for people. They either don't believe me, they don't feel that I have the capacity to not know. I don't know. It's really weird, but it really seems to trigger a certain type of person. Because I think most people are very uncomfortable with that notion. You know, but I've learned in life, I only know what I know because I know in the grand scheme of things, I don't know anything. Like I'm only gaining small bits of information every day I go on, and there's no way I can, you know, this existence is amazingly dynamic. So I'm more comfortable saying I don't know these things at this point, which I think people should be more comfortable with that. You get a lot further. As soon as you're certain about something, you've closed yourself off to a whole host of possibilities.
I think that's the most honest answer you can give. I mean, if I'm truthfully honest, it's the same answer I would give because I can't go up and have a look. But as far as I can tell, it's flat. And when you
Yeah.
pry into how everybody else addresses it, they address it as being flat, as far as they can tell. You know, so what everyone's working with is flatness, and what I've experienced is flatness. And I've done a fair bit of travel and seen a lot of flatness. So when I say it, it's because, you know, I'm quite happy to go out on a limb and say, well, based on what I've seen, I'm not going to make any claims that I've been to Antarctica. And Robert Shortman, who, you know, he's said he's going to have a hangout in, I think he said it was the 7th of next month. But, you know, a guy who's been to Antarctica, I'm more than happy to chat with somebody like that and get their experience and first-hand knowledge. Do I want to go down there? I mean, we're coming up on the hour. I don't know if you want to extend this conversation a bit, but, you know, I feel that we're being pointed in these directions. Secrets, real secrets, you never hear of. You know, if there was a great big massive continent in the middle of one of the oceans and the shipping lanes just past it, you know, that would be a true secret. We just never ever hear about it. You know, this has happened in recent history with discoveries of continents. So I'm not exactly far out there by saying this sort of stuff. You know, it's very feasible that within the ring we could find more land if you were to take it that we are in an ice ring if we're surrounded by Antarctica. Again, I've got no idea if we're surrounded by Antarctica. literally none. I'm sure you would agree. You know, it's a nice idea. It's
Yeah, it makes
an ad
sense.
hoc explanation for some tricky questions, but beyond that, I don't know. It could be anything.
Yeah, and I've been saying a while now that the southern seas are just rife for deception. There could be a whole other continent there, like Elysium. Have you ever seen that movie? Like just some advanced technology that they've set up and posted up there for the past 50 years. We have no idea. Like you've pointed out before, we're stuck in shipping lanes and specific ways to travel over the ocean. We are all using, for the most part, fuel systems, which only get us so far, very limited. You know, in a vehicle's 300 miles. I don't know what an airplane can usually go distance-wise before they have to refuel again. But they have us on this system where we cannot travel. We cannot go far enough to be able to explore our world. Plus, they tell you from day one, oh, we've already explored it all. Here's the globe. Here's a map. They did this. They did that. We already got it covered. Don't worry about it. And that scene from Truman Show is very relevant, where he's like, I want to be an explorer. She pulls the map down, says, oh, we already figured it out. Don't worry about it. This is what they've done to us through. They're giving us nonstop bread and circus. That's all they're doing. And you know, everybody, and it's just, it's gotten worse and worse because people are perpetually being entertained. The masses are, and they're continuing their, you know, day in, day out slave job. They're just being entertained, go to sleep, wake up, watch the programming, go to work. It's this constant thing where the curiosity has been beaten out of humanity. And this has been manufactured, and for good reason. They don't want us to explore. At this point, let's say we'll take it as true for a moment. If the Earth were absolutely flat or it was a level plane, then it would make more sense that there is more land, considering how we saw what they did to America when, now we don't know how true that story truly is, but you know, the Columbus coming over looking for the West Indies or whatever, ended up finding, you know, America, whole civilization here, they completely decimated, did a whole genocide on a type of people out here in the West. And maybe they don't want a repeat of that. Maybe they know of a continent down there and out there that they don't want us to know about for national security reasons. I mean, all of these things make sense to me. And it just takes a person to be able to kind of evaluate their world differently than what we've been conscripted to. The heliocentric globe Earth model, we have been conscripted to it before our age of reason. That should be the biggest red flag for everybody. They should stop and say, wait a second, why did they program us this way? Because that's how human beings work. They are programmable, and they know how to do it. They have it down to just the most, they know exactly what to do. So I think it's likely they're hiding more land if this is the case. And I don't know, this may be a soft, you know, rollout of the system being different than what we're told. You know, I don't know if this is organic or not. I've theorized that this is not organic. You know, like where did it all come from 2 years ago?
I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to assess. Some days I put the hat on that it is organic. Some days I put the hat on that it isn't. But I mean, going back to the maps, the thing that really struck a chord with me was the Mapper Monday. You know, there's no New World on there. New World. We won't go down that avenue. But yeah, they've got a circled map, and it's not on there. And they parade this thing around in a box and say, "Here you go. This is where we are." And what a shock! This is all of it. That's what they're telling them. This is
Yeah.
all of it. That's why your land costs what it costs. They're not making any more of it. They were still peddling that nonsense before they found the New World. Well, what do you
Now
know? They found
that's
it
a
and
great
incorporated.
correlation.
Say again?
Oh, I'm sorry. I said that's an amazing parallel. It's a great correlation you just made there. This is
Well,
very
yeah,
true.
and there you have your aliens. You know, when they arrive, well, what do they find? They're finding aliens, and that can, and I think will happen again. You know, you said about them just finding it in another ocean. That's what I think potentially could happen. You know, we are more than just bound within the confines. This will speak to people who think there's a dome. You know, for all you people who think that we're in a completely enclosed system, I for one do not. But for all you who do, there's still more land if you want to think of it in those ways. You know, there's plenty of ocean. You know, why not? We could still explore. There's a lot of space, literally. With the, you know, we're not in a small area. It's big. It's not a small pen if you want to see it that way. But yeah. I think we might round out there. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add or plug or.
Well, no, I mean, just my channel is just Cathexis with this symbol, which is less equals more. We've got 13 episodes of the scientism, science versus scientism that I do with Quantum Eraser. John's great. He has a science background. He does come from a alternative perspective, looking at evolution, quantum mechanics, things like that, and you know, it's just it's a good contrast to see what the mainstream's saying and what actual science is saying, rather than all of these mental gymnastics they have to make in order to make their fairy tales real. So if anybody's interested, definitely check it out. We're going to be doing another episode here, just kind of an appendium type thing here next week. But that's it. I've got some things in the works. I'm putting together a book for my ketogenic diet stuff. I'm actually going to be merging the ideas here very soon, where I'm going to go out and you know, put my website back up and you know, help anybody who might be interested. And I've already helped a couple of people out here so far, just through casual interaction with them. So I'm hoping to have some more positive effect on people's health coming up soon. But yeah, that's about it.
Cool. I mean, I will plug that again because Science versus Scientism, I loved that. That was an excellent series. I really, really, really enjoyed that. So I will actually put a link to that in the info box below this video. So you click on that, check out Cathexis' channel, subscribe. Same with me, like and subscribe. I've been Nathan Oakley. I'll see you all in the next video.